my friends. Lori Ashcraft here. I'm your host for VIVA LA EVOLUTION, which is produced by Recovery and Resilience Solutions at Crestwood Behavioral Health. And we're just very happy to have you here with us today. I have a wonderful guest for us today, a woman that I met a couple of years ago at a Peerpocalypse. I always worried I'm going to get that wrong. I think I did even. Peerpocalypse conference in Oregon. By the name of Kells Perry. And she was the keynote speaker at on one of the days, and she blew me away. I couldn't get near her afterwards, but I did manage to get a business card. Someone passed me her business card, and I've tried to stay in touch with her. She's really busy, so it's not easy to stay in touch with her. But she did, and in fact, was very happy to come and talk with us today. She's going to be talking about some really interesting topics. She covers, and these are sensitive areas. So I knew she could do this because I saw her do it at the conference. She's going to talk a little bit about the imposter complex. This is something that a lot of us have and have had to deal with, especially if we've had behavioral health issues. It just kind of makes us a little more vulnerable to that. So she does a really good job about getting into that. The other topic she's going to cover is gender issues. And I'm so grateful because this is an area that I don't know a lot about. And I learned a lot from her. So pay attention to those two areas. Let's see, I think that's all I need to give you a heads up on. So, okay, let's go talk to Kells. Here we go. So, Kells, thank you so much for being willing to join us today. I'm just looking so forward to having you share your story and your wisdom with us. I met you, I know, at the Peerpocalypse conference a couple years ago, and you just spoke to my heart so deeply that I think I even sent you a note and said, can I help you tell your story or whatever? And then when I started doing podcasts, I thought, oh, that would be so great if you could come and talk to us. So thanks so much. And let's just start with, say a little bit about your organization and what you do.
Yeah, no, I'd love to. And thank you for having me on the podcast. I really appreciate that. I do remember you sending me the note. I was very flattered. So thank you. So I work for, so my name is Kells and pronouns are she, they. I work for New Narrative, which is a integrative mental health organization in Portland metro area. And I'm the director of peer services at that agency. So we provide a lot of different services, clinical, residential, housing, and then peer support, of course, which is what I'm part of.
Mm-hmm.
And we have many peers, many different kinds of programs. It's very exciting work.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds amazing. So that it sounds like a big organization overall with
Yeah.
with the peer component.
Yeah, it has over 300 employees. Yeah, it's pretty big.
Yeah, that's great.
Mhm.
Great. Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about wherever you want to start. What works for you? And when I heard you before, you brought into your conversation the whole thing of feeling like an imposter or the imposter situation.
Yeah.
I've had that myself, and I know so many of our viewers, especially women, go through that. So if you could share a little bit of that too. And if you
Mhm.
don't mind, I'll just interrupt you now and then. I'll apologize right now for that. I kind of get excited, and so
No, that's totally fine. Please
okay.
interrupt. But yeah, no, yeah, I definitely so the speech that I gave had a lot to do with imposter syndrome because that is also something like you just said, that you deal with, that I deal with that a lot of people uh assigned female at birth, or people that are socialized in a certain way, or marginalized individuals as well, experience that a lot. I mean, people also in the dominant culture do as well.
Mhm.
And it's something that has followed me throughout my life. It's made it harder for me to speak up and use my voice, which is an important instrument when you your support and when you're advocating. And also, it's just been something I've noticed in a lot of systems that we have, not just on a personal level, but also on a systemic level, and also in the family system that we're a part of. So I'd love to just share a little bit of my story if that would be okay with you.
That'd be wonderful, wonderful.
Sounds great. And don't mind me if I'm looking down for a moment here or there. I took a little bit of notes to remind
That's
me.
okay. I do that too. So,
So, I used to believe that imposter syndrome was really a personal feeling that you like, where was like there was a lot of emphasis on not believing enough in yourself, or not being able to understand that your achievements were something that you had accomplished through like your talent or your determination. And the more I've thought about it over time, the more I've realized that it doesn't really start with us. It actually starts sooner than that. So in my family, I would say generationally, there's a lot of trauma, and it definitely is apparent in the way that my mother is. Though I'm not close with her, she did raise me primarily. Both my parents are divorced, but my mother was the person who primarily raised me, and she's a very hard worker, very accomplished person. But I always noticed it was never enough. Like there was never like a moment where she felt proud of her achievements or felt like she had made it or whatever that is. And I
mhm,
think I've noticed that I've carried that into my adult life as well too. And when I think about that and I look back to the long line of women that I'm from and all the hard work they've done, I can see a pattern of behavior that's tied very strongly to trauma and also the systems that we're living in.
mhm,
And,
mhm.
it's hard because like my mother didn't really know how to avoid passing that trauma on to me because she doesn't really believe in mental health or therapy.
Yeah.
I obviously am very much the opposite of that because I work in mental health and I'm a peer support specialist. But she did the best she could with what she had. And unfortunately, though, passed that messaging down. And also, it impacted me growing up because I was also a child that was very impulsive. I was very loud. I was very easily distracted because I have ADHD.
Mhm,
And that was also another way that I was getting a lot of the messaging from teachers and like administrators and other adults around me, telling me I need to stop talking, I need to stop interrupting people, I need to focus up, I need to, live up to my potential. And
mhm.
um, it's something that I think a lot of people deal with in the mental health world, whether you have ADHD or not.
Right.
It's
And,
especially.
Kels, could we pick up just a little bit on this generational trauma? Um, I can so relate to that because my mother was Cherokee and she brought with her a few generations of trauma. And it's, generational trauma is sneaky, isn't it? Because it's not out in, we don't get it right away. At least I didn't.
Yeah,
Um,
I
I
didn't.
just, yeah. And my mom, I think you kind of described my mom when you described your mom of being a hard worker, um, being tough but really fragile, um, and just easily hurt, but unstoppable at the same time. And I think that's just part of that generational trauma where you don't know where that hurt came from. You don't know where that feeling of being less than came from. But somehow it gets harnessed to push you forward, um, even though you're crying your eyes out while you're doing it. So I just wanted to shine that a little bit more there because so many of us have that. What I love about peer support is it's an opportunity to take um, all that pain and that sense of failure and not being good enough, um, and putting it to work, giving it a purpose. It's like, oh, yes, I went through all of that, but now I can use that to help somebody else. So it, I don't know anything other than peer support that does that so well. It gives an opportunity to give back from that point of pain in a way that's healing ourselves as well as other people.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Like, I'd always been interested in, well, shouldn't say always. When I was a small child, not so much, but when I was a teenager, I was really interested in psychology and like trying to understand my family and also myself and the people around me.
Mhm.
And read a lot of books about it at the time, but peer support is when I really started to feel like that's the where the light bulb moment came on for
Yeah.
me, where this takes the best of like this knowledge and also combines it with that lived experience in a way that is very healing, in my opinion. Like peer
Yes.
support, even as being a peer support specialist, has done a lot for me as a human being. Has helped me with my trauma. It's been such a treasure to me to see how it impacts people positively, like
Mhm.
other people I watch, people I've interacted with, and how much it means just to have a person who can listen to you that is not coming from a place of a clinical remove, that is not
Mhm.
potentially like, not that to say clinicians are judging you, but like peer support, I've noticed most people feel more comfortable, especially if they already have
Yeah.
distrust.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, oh, you get it. You're like me.
Yes.
I have a very challenging relationship with my mother, which I did share in the speech that I did at Pure Apocalypse. So
Mhm.
on the one hand, she is somebody that I admire immensely, who has done me a great deal of she's given me a great deal of strength and a great deal of resilience and ability to pursue things and be ambitious and also to dream for things that are bigger than what I'm doing. And I
Mhm.
know she's been a big force that has driven me from childhood to adulthood, even while also holding the imposter syndrome and the generational trauma.
Yeah.
And also, the hard part of it is, as I shared in my story before, that we had a breaking point when I was 14 that actually fueled a lot of my imposter syndrome and has, when I gave the speech, it made me think very differently about um, how it shows up, because I had never once thought that like trauma could be a core aspect of what imposter syndrome is. And I
Mm.
really think it is. It My stepdad, you don't mind me sharing? I know you've heard it
Mm.
before, but
Yeah.
when I was 14, my stepdad sexually abused me, and it was, of course, a very upsetting and very traumatic experience. And trauma really fractures, I think, the self. It fractures your identity and your ability to sort of connect with the confidence that you might have had, or at least like the belief in yourself, the very core belief that you're a safe person, or that you're not in danger, that you could take care of yourself. It really messes with that core
Mhm.
belief that you can handle things. At least for me, it did. I can't speak for everyone else. So my experience was it really fractured that,
Yeah.
and it really took away my voice in a way that I had not experienced up to that point. I'd experienced other types of abuse, but that was by far the most profoundly affecting.
Mhm.
And it really divided my family, unfortunately. My mom is also a victim of sexual abuse. And I think that generational trauma component again,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
where her experience wasn't treated with the kindness and care that it deserved, and she wasn't validated or supported. And I know it's a core wound that she carries.
Mhm.
We talk about it in passing here and there because it's an uncomfortable conversation for her at times.
Yeah.
Um, but it really divided our family because I think that it really activated that trauma from her time
Yeah.
and really drove us away from each other, unfortunately.
Mhm. Mhm.
But it also kind of set me on a journey where I had to like redefine who I was as a person. I had to like find other reserves of strength and other things to look forward to in life. And honestly, it has made me a person who, I phrase it, like it has shown me, not that I'm glad it happened. I'm not, like I'm I don't think anyone would be, but it has shown me that I can handle a level of adversity that before I did not think I could have. And so if I take one lesson away from it, I'm at least glad for that, to know that I have that reserve of strength. After all, at the time I couldn't see that because when you're younger, of course, you don't have like the fully developed brain or like the life experience to like reflect back and look at how you've grown up and changed over time. But it it drove me, I think, to where I am now, and I'm very proud of where I am now, even if it cost something along the way.
Mhm.
And it fueled a lot of the speech I gave as well too. Just knowing that that's an experience, unfortunately, a lot of people have had. Um, Especially a lot of people assigned female at birth. I mean, men have also experienced it too. I don't want to negate those very real experiences that often are invisible and not treated as seriously, which is not okay. Um, but it's something that we just don't talk about enough, I think, in our culture overall, and also how it feeds into imposter syndrome, like I was mentioning earlier. Because if you have at your very core this impression that like I am not worthy, and you have that message, whether your brain is telling you that, whether other people are telling you that, which was an experience I was having in both cases. It's very hard as you grow up to see that you have any worth at all, or
Yes. Yeah.
deserve anything that you get, even your accomplishments. So
Yeah.
I've been talking a lot now.
That's okay. You're doing a great job of describing this. A few weeks ago, I had one of my dear friends, Chris Bartz, on and telling his story. And he and I both have struggled with trying to get over sexual abuse as a very young person. And every once in a while, I think I've healed myself one way or the other. Usually spiritually, I get that idea. But then it'll just come back now and then as a blast. And it's very much like you're describing. It's this feeling of just being damaged goods somehow. Um, and I know that that's not true. I mean, I know that that was a point in time, that it wasn't my fault, that it didn't diminish me in any way. But the idea that I carry forward is that there's something terribly wrong with me. And I already had struggles with depression and anxiety before that happened, but that just kind of locked it in. And Chris said a lot of the same stuff. So what you're doing a great job of describing succinctly what it's like to um, to try to use the energy of those experiences in a way that begins to heal us.
When you talk about marginalized individuals who also have that trauma component and also systemically are being told you're not worthy, you're not good enough the way you are, you need to conform to this dominant culture and what it looks like, or you're not going to be accepted, whether that's because of race or gender, orientation, or your mental health, or
Mhm.
your physical health, whatever that looks like, socioeconomic class. Um, it definitely adds and fuels what already exists and deepens the message even more. And I can't remember exactly when it was. I knew I was queer since I was 13 or 14. I knew it at that time, kind of abruptly out of nowhere. I knew that. So I was like, oh, okay.
Mhm.
I was not expecting that. And the person I'm with now is actually the person I met when I was 14. So we've been together for over 21 years, which is
Oh
really,
my goodness.
yeah.
Congratulations.
Um, and there was a point where they and transitioned from female to male. And I had always kind of felt a little bit unsure about my gender, like not like all the time, because I do identify with some aspects of being feminine. But there was like different feelings I had, and I would say that it also made me feel imposter syndrome. Also made me feel like I'm not trans enough, like I'm not the right kind of transgender person, because
Mhm.
I envisioned what that looked like for me. I didn't see it as like a straight line from female to male. I saw like more of like in between, because I identify as non-binary. And even in that way, imposter syndrome shows up. And I'm sure that's true even for other people who don't have that specific experience.
Mhm. Mhm.
Again, maybe a different race, maybe a different physical ability when they look at themselves in relation to what the rest of the culture thinks they should be at or should be doing.
Mhm.
So I very much it was interesting to just see how much it weaves into all these different identities we hold and we don't even think about it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You know, at that conference, it just seemed to me like there were a lot of people there that had different gender identities and were in different. I, I mean, I realized at that conference how little I knew about what was going on in the gender world, and um, and I thought a lot about that since, because I thought I know people now that but I don't know very many people, and maybe there are people and they just don't tell me because they don't think I'll get it or something. But I realized that, I mean, here, this has got to be an important part of someone's life. And I don't know how to talk about it. I'm afraid to bring it up. So I just don't. And then when I don't bring it up or talk, then it's like I'm rejecting somehow this really important part of them. Can you help me and us with some of that?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to. I mean, I can't speak for all trans people, of course, because I'm just one person, but I can do my
Yeah.
best. I would say, from my experience, because most of my friends are people who identify as LGBTQIA or queer, is what we usually call ourselves,
Yeah.
kind of reclaiming the slur.
Yeah.
Uh, and then a number of them are also transgender. Not all of them. There are some that are not. Like two of my friends are in a heterosexual relationship, but they're both bi. And they're also cisgender, so they identify with the gender they were assigned at birth.
Mhm.
Um, but I would say the number one thing, and I think that there's a lot of fear around like offending people, and I think there's like a
Yeah.
perception
Yeah.
that it's applied to the transgender community, which is that we're fragile, and I actually think that's not true. I would say that people in the transgender community have to go through a lot of adversity, a lot of medical hoops and personal hoops and familial hoops and systemic ones, and
Gosh. Yeah.
politically, I would say as well too, to some extent,
Yeah.
uh, to be recognized for their identity and also to have that identity respected and not demeaned in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I don't get the fragile part. I mean, I know a lot of tough people that are, I think they're pretty tough, but when I get to know them, they're kind of fragile. So, but to just go through everything you just discussed, yeah, that takes a lot of courage and strength to navigate and survive that.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I mean, and I know that our experiences, though unique to gender, I know that a lot of other people in the marginalized communities have to go through very difficult levels of adversity that maybe I don't understand or fully like can appreciate the struggles or the trauma that causes. But I would say just in general for trans folks, like if you make a mistake with somebody's pronouns, I think this is one that comes up a lot where people are like, "Oh no, what if I say the wrong pronoun? They're going to be mad at me, so I better not say it at all." Or like there's a lot of anxiety about saying someone's pronouns. Most people, I would say 9 out of 10 trans people are not going to react negatively if you accidentally mess up their pronouns. What is more concerning is if you make no effort to be mindful of it in the future, if you make no effort to call them by the pronouns they go by, that is more concerning. Like if you do it in bad faith, if you do it by accident, that's fine. And I
mhm,
would also just say a lot of people out of purely good intention might accidentally misgender somebody. And then like, oh no, I'm sorry. Or they might mess up their name,
mhm,
call them their dead name or the name that they used to go by but no longer do. And then
mhm.
they're like, oh no, and no, because they're trying to make up for the harm they feel they've caused, and they want to draw attention, not in a bad way, but draw attention to, I'm really sorry I did this to you. I want you to know that I'm not going to do it again. And that sometimes actually makes things more awkward, like, especially if you're in a
Yes.
you do that.
Yeah.
My opinion is if someone messed up my pronouns, I'm not going to correct them typically. If they continuously do it just to be cruel, then yeah, I might say something at that time. But most trans folks, I think, as long as you try your best to just get the pronouns and the name right, and you're not um, making excuses for not learning or trying to educate yourself, and you're not looking to trans people to educate you on every aspect of their identities, then I think that that's a good first start, is just like be curious but not in a way that's invasive. Like don't ask questions that you wouldn't ask somebody else. You wouldn't ask like a cisgender person about their genitals. That's none of your business.
That's a
um
really good advice right there. Don't ask something you wouldn't ask somebody else.
yeah,
That's
because
helpful. Yeah.
trans people are the same as any other people. Like, yes, their gender identity might be different than the dominant culture, or their path to that gender identity might look different than the dominant culture, but uh, we're all just very regular people. There's really not, like uh, even people who celebrate the culture more and maybe more involved in the culture, like it. We all just want to be treated like any other person. I
Mhm.
think at the end of the day, like, and I think that even being trans is not the most interesting thing about us. It's just one thing about us. The same way
Yeah.
that I have
Yeah.
darker hair. I'm also a trans person. Eh, it's just part of who I am.
Well, it seems like forever had a lot of gay and lesbian friends. In fact, at this moment, some of my very dearest friends fall into those groups.
Mhm.
And I don't ask them questions. I mean,
Mhm.
because they're just people to me.
Exactly.
That's like, like you're saying, whatever they choose is just one little part of them. And the part of me that wants to be with them is just the human being
Mhm.
part. So that all seems good. That all seems good. Um, but yeah, I think I'm okay with that. I think I do okay there. I just realized that, when it started at that conference, like, oh my gosh, I could make so many mistakes here. And I'm so ignorant. I had no idea of the different choices and the different combinations that people could choose. Um, and then I found myself just thinking, oh, I better not say anything. But then it was like, then I act like I'm not interested, and I'm very interested in them, and want to hang out with them, and go for walks and have tea and talk about our dogs and you know regular stuff.
What you just said right there, like touching upon that, is like I don't even know that people have to comment on someone's gender or or bring it up because I don't necessarily know that trans folks. Obviously, I can't speak for everyone, but I don't know that trans folks will feel offended if people don't recognize that. It's more like again pronouns in bad faith or saying their name wrong on purpose versus
Yeah,
making a
yeah,
mistake. You
yeah,
just right there is just celebrate what's the same
yeah,
about you. Also unique too, but those common moments because we're just people. So you guys have dogs, you love dogs. Just talk about that. It's the same way if you want to get to know, for anyone who wants to get to know people who are outside of their typical circle or people who may not share that experience with. I think that the human element, like you mentioned earlier, that human connection is what matters way more than any of the other aspects of them. And I don't want to say that to erase those things, right? Those things do matter and they do affect how that person walks through the world and how the world treats
yeah,
them.
yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
it be ignorant and privileged to avoid the tough conversations that come up around those experiences and what that means for that person.
Mhm.
But in general, just getting to know somebody, I think that just relating on just a human level, like you like a dog, you like dogs. Oh, you like this movie? I love these kinds of movies. Those are the things that most queer and trans people I think are just looking for, just to be treated the same as anyone else.
Well, yeah, okay. I think that's the bottom line right there.
Mhm.
I had an experience, I want to say a year ago now, um, with a person who had transitioned from being a woman to being a man, and I didn't know that because there was nothing obvious. I just thought that this was a man I was relating to, and and it was a person that I would get advice from on various things. And then one day he just started telling the story um, about his former life. And I was curious, but at the same time, I thought, oh, I better not act like there's anything uh, different going on here. Or, um, but I wanted to say, well, gosh, if there's anything I can do to support you, or I mean, you know, I don't know, I will. But it just all felt so. I think just because I didn't know what to say or do.
Mhm.
I wish I would have said more now that I think about it.
Yeah, I think sometimes it's trying to find that I think you're trying to find the middle road between what's respectful and also acknowledging their experiences.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, yeah, because I hear what you're saying. You don't want to ignore their lived experience and what they've gone through and the fact that they're
Yeah,
being sharing it with you. Um, but also it's tough to know is this something I should comment on in terms of or ask questions around, or should I just take the experience as it's being shared with me and then just sort of support them the same way I did? I
yeah,
think I'll speak for me but I also, from experience with other folks in my circle at least, I think what I look for in a person is like, I don't mind personally, and this is, I'm going to speak very much for myself here because every person is different, and some people
Yeah.
do not want to be asked about it because it's just not something they feel comfortable sharing, nor are other people entitled to that information about them either.
Yeah.
I personally don't mind talking about being trans, obviously, because I'm talking about it now, and also I brought it up in the speech, um, because I recognize not everyone has the same level of knowledge about it. The same way that I can definitely admit that I don't have the same level of knowledge about many different people who are in marginalized communities that maybe I'm not interfacing with as much. Like, I may know some folks, but like I don't, obviously, also people aren't a monolith. I don't know what everyone's experience is like because it's going to be unique to them, and
Mhm.
I'll maybe have some shared experiences as well too.
Mhm.
Um, I know that like I don't mind answering questions again as long as they're asked in good faith and they're not meant to be invasive or disrespectful, or inappropriate. Like
Yeah.
that's body questions really not appropriate for anyone to ask of anyone else.
No.
And like how they transition like on the medical aspect, that's not really something people should expect to have shared with them.
Mm.
The same way that maybe like a person who identifies as being a woman and was assigned female at birth maybe gets a breast reduction, they don't want to necessarily talk about that with somebody
Right.
else
Yeah.
or ask questions like, why are you asking me? Like that feels weird. But yeah, it's tough to know. So I can relate to what you're saying. Like you want to be respectful. You want to make sure that you're not like overstepping your bounds, or taking
Mhm.
something they're sharing with you and overreacting to it in some way, even if it's meant with good intentions to ask, how can I help you? How can I support you? But
Yeah.
if you've known somebody for a long time too, like sometimes you could just ask them, like, hey, I this is a really I appreciate your vulnerability and sharing this story with me. Like, is there do you feel like there's anything I could do better to support you? That might
Mhm.
be a way to
Yeah.
phrase it, because then you're not emphasizing like that they need your help, but that you're just saying, can I do something better to
Yeah.
support you?
Yeah.
And also, I will say some trans people, because I think this is a distinction that the cisgender community maybe is not aware of. Because I think non-binary people sometimes, or agender people, which are people that I'm going to get it wrong here and embarrass myself with the queer community, or like a third gender. Um, and there's more than that. I'm simplifying it here for the purpose of this conversation, but some trans people genuinely feel very strongly from the time they're young until the time they transition that like I knew a person, not very well, but I knew a person who was assigned female at birth, and when I met them later in life they were a man. And when we talked about their experiences, they never referred to it as a transition. They always referred to it as I am a man, I was a man then, I'm a man now.
Mm.
Some
Mm.
people really do want to pass, and do pass very successfully as the gender that they're presenting as, and
Mhm.
may be less interested in those conversations. It really is very specific to that individual person, of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah. Thank you for being willing to talk about this. I think so many of us don't know what to do.
sure, sure.
Um, and then I think when we don't know what to do, we make stuff up, and uh, so knowing, just getting some ideas about how to proceed, I think is really helpful. Helps me anyway.
Yeah, and I mean, there's so many resources too, like on YouTube, and like there's books that are like gender identity, like 101 kind of. I cannot think of the graphic novels, but there's a series of like small, like pretty short graphic novel books that talk about pronouns and talk about what gender identity is and all that stuff. So I would encourage anyone who doesn't like know, or they don't know what to do, or maybe they're feeling unsure because they're not trying to hurt people, but they want to like do what's right by people.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Is like a lot of those are written by trans people who are trying to share that information too, because we all, many of us recognize it's not like something a person just intuitively knows off the bat. So
yeah.
there's
Right. Yeah. Especially people who are older. I mean, we didn't grow up with this, and I think older people are more likely to be judgmental, and that it's just a product of fear. We make judgments about things because we're scared. We don't know what it means for us. We don't know what it means for the world. Like, what's happening here?
Mhm.
Um, so anything we can do to stay out of that zone of being judgmental, and I think knowing more how to be and understanding the process starts to help mitigate some of that.
I could definitely agree. I think that just not being afraid to be wrong sometimes and being able to put the ego aside if you do make a mistake and understand that like if someone's trying to like inform you about how you might have misstepped, that it's not something that, and this is not even just true for transgender people, like this is also something that I know the Black community has spoken out about a lot, is like the white fragility component of not being comfortable enough to just sit in the discomfort of like I don't know this thing, or
Yeah,
maybe I messed
yeah,
up and I said something that was really offensive or racist or inappropriate. um I think that's true for a lot of marginalized communities. It's like being open-minded to the fact that you don't know everything. How could you? I mean, you're not only one person with certain identities.
yeah, yeah,
The difference is the people who actually make that effort to be humble and to understand I am going to mess up. I'm not going to make excuses for messing up. I'm going to learn from that and do better. And I
yeah,
will acknowledge and be accountable when I do mess up, and without trying to defend myself or make it about me or center my experiences to deflect from what they're experiencing. I think that no matter what your generation is, if you try your best just to do that one piece, just to be open minded, to hear people's experiences, to be okay with being accountable and
mhm,
ready to be accountable when you mess up without centering your feelings or your intention, which I think a lot of people get confused by. They think, well, I didn't intend to hurt you.
yeah,
Therefore, you can't be mad at me. And it's like, well, impact matters too. Whether
right.
you
Yeah. Whether
somebody
you
or,
meant it or not. Yeah,
and just
yeah,
like with anything, like that's not even just for marginalized communities, but like even in an argument you have with a spouse or a friend, like intention matters, but impact is also really important too.
absolutely. Yeah.
I think, and I will say also, I think with the older generations, I think it was less visible, but it was still very present. I
Mm,
think a lot of trans and queer individuals in the world who maybe did not feel safe, or it was fatally, um, it was fatal for them to be open, like
mhm, mhm. Yeah,
their job
very
or
unsafe.
their home. So I think it definitely was still present, but much more hidden, much more insular.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
And I really appreciate all the sacrifices that the queer community has made, especially Black trans women have made for the queer community to be as free and open as it is now,
Yeah.
uh, in a way that it definitely was not, um, in the 60s, 50s, and on. You know,
Mm, yeah. I don't even remember. Well, I guess in the 60s, I can remember conversations about gay and lesbian people, but it was, it's, it wasn't even, I think even then, if you were gay or lesbian, you just didn't, you tried not to act like it maybe. And you definitely didn't talk about it.
probably not 60s, honestly.
You could get killed for it.
No, and many people were, which is very sad.
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
know in places that still happens. It doesn't happen as much, thank God, but
yeah.
it's dangerous. So, but yeah, no, it to tie it actually back to peer support again. I know also the MAD movement was happening in the 60s as well too, in addition to the civil rights movement, and also a lot of the movements that were made towards queer and trans equality as well. It's very meaningful and moves me a lot as a person to think of all these groups of people that just were disenfranchised by the world they lived in, that were not welcome in communities, that were punished in the mental health community too, where when we
Mhm.
had this asylum system, when like
Yeah,
that was
yeah,
expanded eventually, but like, and even now the medical model still holds so much structure that it's comes from that, is inspired from that, the DSM too, though I personally do take medication and do get clinical therapy. I also see very much the harm it does
mhm,
folks in certain
yeah,
communities, and is not the answer for everybody. And it's really dependent on the individual person and what they need and what's right for them. Because I know
yeah.
people have different experiences that and different ways of healing, than others. So I'm never going to say that there's one way to like recover or one way to like be a person in the world with a mental health experience.
Yeah.
It's just so interesting to think of all the hard work that those folks have done in these
Mm.
different communities to bring us
Yeah.
to where 2024, which still has lots of work to be done, of course. But in
Yeah.
fact, we can even have a conversation right now so openly about our mental health conditions, and it's not a big deal. Like it's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. Well, we've covered a lot of ground here. Are there things that we haven't talked about that we meant to?
Um, I think, I mean, the only thing really in closing that I want to bring up is just for those who do struggle with imposter syndrome, like you and me and other people out there, especially people who have received that messaging systemically and from their families and school systems, societal institutions like the medical model and all of that, that they're just the reminder that like you might be the best person for where you're at, and there's not some ideal person waiting in the wings who could have done it better than you. You are
Mhm.
the that, and you
Yeah.
don't have to prove that you deserve to be there like that. You don't have to earn your right to be there. You already deserve that. Like you've worked
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
where you are, whatever that looks like, whatever achievement it is, and it's okay to rest. You don't have to prove yourself over and over again. Like
Yeah. Yeah.
you're good enough.
I have a friend who sometimes says, when we have these conversations, he says, you are the person you're waiting for.
I love.
That's good, huh?
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's a really beautiful sentiment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, maybe we've done it then, girl.
Okay.
It's just been delightful talking with you. Thank you so much for your time. And yeah, we'll have to do this again sometime.
Of course, no, yeah,
Yeah.
podcast. Like I'd love to talk to you more. So thank you so much. I
Okay.
really appreciate it. Like it was a very sweet gesture you made talking to me after and also sending me the message after that speech and inviting me here. Like thank you. It validates the reason I shared this story, just the fact that it meant something to somebody and it was impactful in some ways. So and it was really impactful to hear your story as well too. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, I knew Kells wouldn't let us down. She did a great job covering those two main topics and a few other things that were interesting. So I just feel so much better equipped now to to be with people who have gender issues in a way that's supportive and helpful, instead of being worried that I'm going to say the wrong thing all the time. I hope that helped you too. So, okay, well, that's it for today, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for joining us. Have a wonderful rest of your week.